All right, everyone, let's dig into the polling data for the 2024 presidential election and explore the landscape with a more nuanced approach. Instead of merely regurgitating the numbers, we're going to adjust these figures based on the polling errors we saw in the 2020 election. You might ask why this adjustment is necessary, and the answer lies in how those past inaccuracies impacted our understanding of the electoral race. In 2020, we witnessed some significant discrepancies between what the polls suggested and the final election outcomes, particularly for the Democratic candidates. The polling frequently overestimated their support. This pattern can lead to misplaced confidence among voters and campaign teams, creating a false sense of security. Therefore, by recalibrating the polling data to account for these historical errors, we can achieve a more accurate reflection of the current political climate, revealing that Trump may be in a stronger position than many are willing to acknowledge. As we draw closer to the election, understanding these adjusted figures is essential to truly gauge how competitive this race will be. Let's break this down and focus on the swing states, those pivotal regions that can determine the election's outcome. There's no need to dwell on the solidly red or blue states. We already know where those will likely land. The real drama unfolds in the battleground states, where every vote counts and they can tip the scales in favor of either candidate. Historically, the Midwest has played a significant role in presidential elections. States like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which once formed a robust Democratic blue wall, are now critical battlegrounds where both parties will invest heavily to secure victory. If Trump can recapture these states, he will dramatically improve his chances of winning. With that framework in mind, let's dive into the polling data and see how it shifts when we factor in those past polling errors from 2020. Let's start with Minnesota, a state that has long leaned Democratic. After all, it hasn't voted for a Republican presidential candidate since 1972. Currently, Kamala Harris has a lead of approximately 4.7 in the polling averages, which might sound promising. However, this is hardly a secure margin. When we apply the 6.2-point polling error we observed in 2020, it turns out that Trump actually surpasses Harris by 1.5. That's a striking revelation when you think about it. A state that has been a solid Democratic bastion for over 4 decades could be on the brink of flipping to Trump. It's not merely conjecture. We have history on our side. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won Minnesota by just 1.5, so it stands to reason that Trump could potentially take this state in 2024. Given these factors, we're classifying Minnesota as lean red. Now that we've clarified how we're categorizing these states, let's establish some parameters. If a candidate is leading by 10 points or more, we categorize that as solid. A lead between 5 and 10 points is deemed light, suggesting that while the state is generally safe for that candidate, it's not guaranteed. A lead of 1 to 5 points is classified as lean, indicating that the race is competitive but trends toward one candidate. Finally, if the margin is less than 1, we label it as tilt, suggesting the race is exceedingly tight and could easily swing either way. This framework helps us visualize how secure or competitive each state is for each candidate. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Next, we turn to Iowa, which is another critical swing state. Currently, Trump holds a firm lead in the polling averages. When we account for polling errors, however, his lead expands to an impressive 10.2. This margin is particularly significant and aligns with Trump's historical performance in Iowa. He won this state by 9 points in 2016 and by 8 points in 2020. Clearly, Iowa has leaned Republican for quite some time, and the current numbers indicate that this trend is likely to continue. For this reason, we're placing Iowa firmly in the solid red category on our electoral map. Now, let's move on to Wisconsin, arguably one of the most crucial swing states in modern elections. At present, Harris has a razor-thin lead of just 0.3 in the polling averages. However, Wisconsin has historically been a state where polling errors have run rampant. In 2016, polls predicted Hillary Clinton would win by 6 points, yet Trump emerged victorious. Fast forward to 2020, where the polls once again overestimated Democratic support, showing Biden winning by 6.3 when he only managed a 0.6 of victory. After adjusting the 2024 polling data for these past errors, we find Trump leading Wisconsin by 5.9. That's a considerable swing and suggests that Wisconsin could very well return to the Republican fold in this election. Given this adjustment, we're moving Wisconsin into the likely red category. Next, let's examine Michigan, another state that plays a vital role in the electoral landscape. Biden won Michigan by a narrow 2.8 margin in 2020, but Trump is currently leading by wine in the polling averages. After we apply adjustments for polling errors, Trump's lead increases to a noteworthy 7.2. This significant shift indicates that Michigan could be on the verge of flipping back to Trump. Keep in mind that in 2016, he won the state by a slim 0.2, making it an incredibly tight race. However, the current adjusted numbers point to a possible move away from the Democrats in 2024. So we're classifying Michigan as likely red. Let's now take a closer look at Ohio, another essential swing state that has shown a clear trend toward Republicans in recent elections. Trump won Ohio by 8 points in 2020 and by 9 points in 2016. Currently, he has a 7.4 lead in the polling averages, but after correcting for polling errors, that lead grows to an impressive 13.6. This significant margin indicates that Ohio is firmly in Trump's corner, allowing us to categorize Ohio as solid red on our map. Now let's shift our focus to Pennsylvania, often viewed as the tipping point in presidential elections. Currently, Trump holds a slight 0.3 lead in the polling averages. However, once we apply the adjustments for polling errors, his lead expands to 6.5. This is particularly noteworthy considering Pennsylvania was part of the blue wall that Trump famously breached in 2016. In the last election, Biden was expected to win by a comfortable margin, yet he only managed to claim victory by just over. If Trump maintains these adjusted leads, it's very plausible that Pennsylvania could revert to red in 2024, prompting us to place it in the likely red category. Let's now take a look at Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. Currently, Harris is leading by a substantial 10 points. However, after accounting for the polling error, her lead narrows to a more precarious 3.8. Although she remains ahead, the reduced margin indicates that this district is much more competitive than it initially appears. Therefore, we're categorizing Nebraska's 2nd district as lean blue. Next up is New York, where Harris is still expected to carry the state, but by a much narrower margin than what Democrats usually experience. Her lead hovers around 12 to 13 points. But when adjusted for polling error, while New York will likely remain a blue state, the reduced margin reveals a significant shift. As such, we're classifying New York as likely blue rather than solid blue. Now, let's examine New Hampshire, a state that has historically leaned Democratic. Harris currently leads by 7.4, but after adjusting for the polling error, her lead shrinks to just 1.2. New Hampshire was extremely close in 2016, with Clinton winning by only 0.30. The state may still be leaning blue, but the tightened margin reveals that it could swing back to the Republicans if they manage to capitalize on this shift. Therefore, we're placing New Hampshire in the lean blue category, but it's clearly on the verge of becoming a battleground. Next is Maine, where Harris is leading by 11.7. However, after adjustments, her lead falls to a more manageable 5.5. Given its tendency to lean Democratic, we're moving Maine into the likely blue category, acknowledging that while it's generally safe, it has tightened compared to previous elections. Now, let's turn our attention to the Sun Belt, which has become a crucial battleground in recent electoral cycles. These states, which once leaned solidly Republican, saw Biden flip some of them like Georgia and Arizona. However, it appears that Trump is gaining traction in the Sun Belt this time around, while Harris is struggling to replicate Biden's strong performance from 4 years ago. Starting with Virginia, where Harris currently holds a lead of 6.4. Yet, when we adjust for polling errors, that lead dwindles to a razor-thin margin of just 0.2. This is particularly alarming for Democrats, as Virginia has recently trended blue. Harris might face a serious challenge in holding on to this state, prompting us to categorize Virginia as tilt blue. Next, let's examine North Carolina, a state that Trump has won in both 2016 and 2020. He currently has a narrow 1.2 lead in the polling averages, but after correcting for polling errors, that lead expands to 7. This indicates that North Carolina is leaning toward Trump, and we're classifying it as likely red, consistent with the trends we've observed in recent elections. Georgia, another vital state in the Sun Belt, is currently showing a 2.5 lead for Harris. However, once we adjust for the polling errors, that lead collapses to a mere 0.3. This state will be closely contested, as both candidates will heavily focus their resources here. For now, we're labeling Georgia as tilt blue, recognizing its competitive nature. Now let's move to New Mexico. Harris is currently leading by 5 in the polling averages, but after adjusting for polling errors, her lead narrows to just 1.8. This places New Mexico in the lean blue category, showing that, while it remains a Democratic state, it's closer than many might expect. Finally, we arrive at Arizona and Nevada, 2 states that are crucial to the Sun Belt battleground. In Arizona, Trump currently has a 1.1-point lead, which expands to 7.3 after applying adjustments for polling errors. This shift indicates that Arizona has moved into the likely red category. Meanwhile, in Nevada, Trump's lead of 0.5 increases to 6.7 after adjustments, prompting us to classify Nevada. So, what does all this data mean when we take a step back and examine the overall picture? After adjusting for those polling errors from 2020, we see that Trump is projected to secure a staggering 322 electoral votes. This isn't just a win. It's a decisive victory by contemporary standards. What stands out here is how competitive this election has become. Despite the controversies and the noise surrounding Trump, he appears to be in a remarkably strong position as we approach Election Day. His path to victory is becoming increasingly clear, and these adjusted figures reveal that the race is much tighter than many might have initially believed. In conclusion, the battleground states are shaping up to be hotly contested, and the polling data paints a picture of a race that is far more competitive than many narratives suggest. This election is shaping up to be a nail-biter, and I'll be here to keep you updated on all the developments as they unfold. If you found this deep dive into the numbers enlightening, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. This election is definitely one to keep an eye on, and I'll see you in the next video.